fight for your right to party.
Well, it's not exactly the Beastie Boys and partying, but workers in Michigan are fighting for their right to work, and union guys are fighting back. So how does this latest standoff between state governments and the labor movement affect the political scene? Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle. Stand by for the front page. Stick around or we're going to punch you in the face. Hi, everyone. I'm Bill Whittle, filling in for Alan Barton. Joining me in studio today is Terry Jones, Associate Editor of Investors Business Daily, and KABC radio host John Phillips. All right, gentlemen, we've seen some amazing things in a year or two that have not gone well for Republicans or conservatives, but slowly working out there. Some very fundamental transformations are taking place. Mostly in the areas of curbing unions and especially public sector unions. We saw the big brouhaha, obviously, in Wisconsin that turned into a win for anti-union forces, and Scott Walker had the same sort of thing happen in Indiana and now Michigan. So I guess the first question, Terry, is what is happening in Michigan and elsewhere, and how did this happen in this environment which seems so pro-liberal?
Yeah, as you noted, it seems to be spreading across the Rust Belt there, and I think what's happened here is people look at their economy, their local economy, and they see it has not thrived under union domination. It has not done better. You look at Detroit, for instance, which Obama held up, I guess, as some sort of exemplar, and it's lost 2/3 of its population in the last 30 years. I mean, it's a disaster by any reckoning you might care to make. They're sending parts of it back to nature. Yeah. So I think people have come to recognize that regardless of their party belief, and let's face it, Midwesterners tend to be rather commonsensical, that this has not worked, and I think it's a massive repudiation of old-style unionism.
You think there's something to that, John, that these very kind of fundamentally conservative measures are passing in heavily unionized states like Michigan and Wisconsin and Indiana, very Rust Belt states? Do you think it's because, as Terry suggested, these are the places that are actually feeling the impact of Obamonomics, and these liberal policies are hurting there more than anywhere else in the country so far?
Well, I think Detroit's a great example. Detroit is the ghost of Christmas future. Labor-backed Democrats control every seat on the city council. They control the mayor. They've controlled the last several mayors. And it's a rotting carcass of a city that has less population than it had in the 1950s. And I'll tell you something else about the labor movement and where they've put the country, where they've put the cities and the states. The Democrats like to criticize conservatives and Republicans as being the anti-science party. Mm-hmm. Well, if we're the anti-science party, they're the anti-math party.
Yeah, that's
because
right.
This is not an issue of ideology. This is an actuarial issue. And these cities and these states are going bankrupt, and the only way to curb that is to throw the brakes on the unions who control every layer of government.
Well, Terry, we've seen massive protests erupting wherever these anti-union measures are passed. And by the way, they're not really anti-union, are they? Because these are not measures that are saying we're going to ban the unions. Unions are illegal. They're simply measures that say you should not be required by law to be in a union in order to work. And it's a right-to-work state. You think it should be a right-to-work country.
Yeah. They're giving workers the right to take back their lives as workers, rather than being forced to belong to an organization against their will, rather than being forced or coerced to give money against their will. They are now being able to, for the first time in decades, to decide whether they want to take part in this system or not. And the problem they're going to have, as we found out early on in Wisconsin, was massive numbers of people are going to just walk away from the union movement because it does nothing for them other than stultify them.
Yeah, in fact, John, let's talk about that for a second, because during the Wisconsin recall, it turned out that Governor Walker got a significant percentage of union votes. He got over 25%, it may have been higher than that. I forget what the number was. But how would you make this case in terms of being required to be in a union? Because it seems to me that if the unions are correct, if unions provide so many benefits for their members, and it's just the absolute way to go, you'd think that writing that union dues check voluntarily would be the high point of your month, right? I can't wait to write this check to my awesome union so that I can get all these wonderful benefits.
Well, I'm a member of a union. We live in a closed shop state. I'm a member of AFTRA, the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, and in case they're watching, I hate your guts. And I'm forced to be a member of this union. And I'll tell you what else is part of it. You're forced to give a contribution to the Democratic Party, because when you're forced to join the union, you're forced to pay your dues. They give virtually all of their money, SAG-AFTRA certainly, to Democratic politicians and Democratic causes. How un-American is that, where they're forcing you to donate against your own beliefs?
They've always been a little peculiar like that. I'd like you to take a look at something here, gentlemen, because one of our former colleagues here at PJTV and a close friend of mine, Steve Crowder, was captured getting sucker punched by one of these union thugs. You can see the footage right there on your screen. Why don't these guys respect the fact that we have First Amendment rights? And don't we have a right to decide if we want to be in a union or not? This is the result of challenging the union's power here, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, and you look at that, and it's, you know, his idea of First Amendment rights is a right followed by a left.
That is the line of the week.
But I mean, it's unbelievable. We look at this country right now, and we're constantly lectured by the left and by the Obama administration that we need civil discourse in this
that's
country.
right.
And this is the exact negation of civil discourse, where you send in your thugs and beat somebody you don't agree with.
And John, I want to just go to this violence issue real quick before we move on too, because the mainstream media, the audiovisual department for the Democratic Party, whichever you prefer, not only doesn't cover the violence that we saw throughout the Occupy movement, all the violence we saw in Wisconsin, not only do they not cover this, but they actually have to invent stories about violence on the part of the Tea Party. Do you think that the American people are able to see through this kind of media screen ultimately when it's all said and done?
Oh, yeah. Could you imagine if this happened at a Tea Party, the NBC Nightly News would cut away from their breathless coverage of Kim Kardashian's ass to do nonstop coverage of the attack at the Tea Party. But Steven Crowder gets punched by a portly Santa Claus there, sucker punched, by the way, at least the second time. And he is trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I was hoping to God that he was going to tear their heads off.
I'd like to make that point.
But he showed restraint.
He did. Steve Crowder is a giant guy, works out 3 hours a day, and he's a martial arts kind of guy. He would have killed that guy.
Oh, yeah.
Problem is, if he had hit that guy back, he probably would have been stomped maybe to death by the entire mob of 30 or 40. He showed incredible control there. Well, guys, let's take a look moving forward here. We see this trend spreading, as we said, Indiana, Wisconsin, Michigan. Where do you think it's headed next, Terry?
I don't think it's headed to California, unfortunately, but I'm certain.
Why not?
Well, I think California is so far gone right now, and we have an electorate here that just seems incapable of understanding what they've done to the state. And we may have to go a little bit farther down the road before people wake up. But, you know, I'm hoping that it at least serves as a wake-up call to the national Republican elite that there are people out there who are fed up with the status quo and that they have to stand up for something. And even these people who are supposedly, you know, centrist, middle, on the even somewhat on the left, will support things that are right for America.
John, we'll close with you on this issue. You know, one of the reasons that Scott Walker won his recall was, as you said, it's not an ideological issue. It's an actuarial issue. He actually turned that state budget around in a very short period of time. We're facing a situation in California now where cities are bankrupt and they're going to stop police and fire services. Do you think even in California, where we all live, we'll ever get to the point where they realize we can either have a choice between having a fire department or paying $500,000 a year retirement pay for a guy who ran the water utility in Bakersfield for 6 months? Do you think even California will eventually get this message?
Well, there were 2 votes on pension reform in San Diego and San Jose where pension reform passed overwhelmingly. And even though, as a general rule, liberals, especially California liberals, are completely hopeless, they still want value for their dollar. And if their house is on fire and they call 911, they want the fire department there. And if you're in a bankrupt city like Detroit and you call the police or you call the fire department, they may or may not show up. There are parts of Detroit that the police are not policing right now. And that's going to happen in cities all over the country if they continue to go bankrupt and run their finances like Detroit and Michigan.
Yeah, I think we can probably fairly say that certainly among many conservative thinkers and politicians even, it's beginning to be clear that the lesson of 2012 is if this is what you're going to vote for, it's time for you to start feeling the pain for your political choices. That's all we have time for today, I'm afraid. For Terry and John, I'm Bill Whittle. You've been watching Front Page.